Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year 2022 here on the Baseball Talk Radio Show. Rolling right along here, January already in effect here. January 9th is the date that I'm doing this show, and I'm usually joined by my co host and in every way better half, Mr. Gary Mack, but he's going to be taking off this week for the first week show here for January 9th. So hope he's doing well, and I look forward to talk to him next week as we get a little more news to talk about in the baseball world. But I hope your holidays were good. I hope Santa brought you everything that you were looking for this year, baseball-wise and otherwise, of course. And I came up with a new gift. I know I was talking a lot about gifts towards the end of the year and what you could get your favorite baseball fan or, somebody that you know that just may be a fan of a specific team. And that's very timely for a calendar. The front of the calendar usually says it all, like if you're a fan of the Mets or the Phillies or the Yankees, baseball in general. You can find those calendars now at your favorite bookstores across the country and the malls. They're probably half price too. So never too late to pick up a nice gift for that baseball fan that you love. And I'm probably later on today, I'm going to be making a trip myself to get some calendars because I'm tired of looking at December still hanging there. And of course, when I look for the date, it's always going to be wrong. So, I think about the 9th of January is time to go out and start looking for a couple calendars. I usually snare a Phillies one and a couple others, maybe a Thomas Kincaid or, something nice like that. So, there's another gift idea for you for that baseball fan that you know. And how about these couple guys here on the podcast? If you're watching the YouTube portion of the podcast, look at the faces on these two. I mean, how are we going to get a settlement in the baseball world, everyone? When you look at Rob Manfred there and the MLB representative on the right, it's kind of telling that, neither of these guys want to budge in this lockout. We heard from Rob Manfred around the 2nd of December, and he said that, placing baseball under a lockout is going to probably force something to happen. And so far, nothing's happened. We haven't heard of any meetings going to take place, things like that. Nothing scheduled even. So it's already the first week of January, and baseball is supposed to start. The first game is supposed to start March 31st as opening day this year. So they haven't done a thing yet to solve this. And both sides of the coin here are playing, a dangerous game for the sport anyway. And I'm going to read some articles, some interesting things there that people have been talking about in the last couple days. And, of course, one of the most onus things about this is you're not hearing anything about the players from teams that are under sort of like a gag order to talk about their players. They can't communicate with them, vice versa. It's just like a cavernous rift between both sides now. So not good for baseball, for the fans, for anybody. And of course, it probably all comes down to money, as does most things in this world. Of course, there's different situations that they have to work out as well, and things like that. So, complicated situation now underway. and I'm monitoring it day by day. Went through the holidays. I didn't really think about it too much. I didn't want to, burden myself with thinking about baseball when it comes down to the holidays and you want to have some fun, enjoy yourself, your family, and being the off season as well, you just don't think about it in general because it's a time, at least in the Northeast, where it's bad weather. We've had snow a couple of times so far this year, and it's just one of those situations where you don't want to start thinking about baseball. But now that January has come upon us, I usually start, those thoughts about warm weather, at least in Florida to start off, and out in Arizona for the other half of baseball. And I've been disappointed. I mean, what else can you say? You think about a sport and then you expect it to start up at some point, and so far it's not starting up. We haven't heard much about anything. You could stay in touch with Twitter and see what the individual players have to say. They're not banned like certain people are from using Twitter, but that's about your biggest mouthpiece now for people in sports, people in entertainment world, politicians to a large degree, is Twitter. I mean, it's like a ubiquitous type of communication device now, and you can follow your favorite players, see what they're saying about what's going on here, and the answer is nothing, not much. Kind of frustrating for everyone, but we'll see what happens as time goes on here. And I found this article just recently. Thought I'd talk about it for a second or two. Unlocking the MLB, how owners, players can reach agreement to play ball. And that's from the New York Post. Author is Ken Davidoff. And he starts off by saying, straightening out Major League Baseball ranks as harder than armchair labor lawyers like yours truly portray it. And I don't want to be an armchair labor lawyer, furthest from my mind, but that's what we hear about every day. What can solve this impasse? He goes on to say that the MLB and its Players Association find themselves so dysfunctional, virtually nothing has happened in the month plus since Rob Manfred shut down the sport with a December 2nd lockout. And that's true. It's been silence. So, if you were planning on shutting down baseball on December 22nd, why wasn't there something scheduled by now? And the answer is both sides are becoming, they want to gain a bargaining chip against the other one. In Davidoff's article, he mentions payroll floors. We've been hearing about MLB clubs proposing a $100 million playoff floor as a minimum in the MLB, and this article gives us some information. It goes on to say last year the Baltimore Orioles operated with the lowest payroll, which was $58 million. And frankly, their season reflected it. It was over 100 losses in the year. And, that is tough for a fan base to absorb. Goes on to say, point 2 here, the luxury tax, in recognition of those floors, continue the modest threshold uptick of the past CBA. And that was just last year, anything over $210 million got a luxury tax for the teams. That's up to baseball and the teams. I think it's a good thing. A certain respect, a lot of markets like LA always are over 200 million. The Dodgers, that is, and the Yankees, for historical purposes, have been over $200 million, quite a lot. So, I mean, the luxury tax is a necessary thing in baseball. Um, I wish some of these smaller market teams could upset the apple cart sometimes and get into the playoffs and go real far. Um, we saw Atlanta do that this year, and they're not exactly a small market team, but they're not on the level of the Yankees, the Dodgers, teams that are spending a ton of money and expect results in October and November for it. All right, scrolling down here, checking it out, revenue sharing. That's a stumbling point of this CBA, minimum player salary. Last season it was $570,000 and 500, so a little over $500,000. Davidoff says increase that to 1.2 million in 2022 and get it to 1.5 million by 2026. That sounds like a lot of money as a minimum salary to me. $1.2 million for a player to make the big leagues sounds like a lot. I don't know about you, but 570,000 is a decent number. I would say 749, 750 tops. I wouldn't go over the million mark myself if I was trying to plan out this minimum salary for either side. I don't think it's good business to be at over $1 million because you're able to put on a baseball uniform and go out on the field in some fashion in the roster. So arbitration, number 5 on Ken Davidoff's list here on this article. And right on down the line, a 14-team postseason. He says it's just too much new revenue to turn down, and I think most clubs will react positively to an increased chance at a playoff action. Of course they will. But what are we going to get out of this? Is it, 14 teams? That's almost half of the MLB will make the playoffs. It's sort of like hockey and basketball where, that second season, it's essentially 2 seasons to me. The regular season, which many times will mean nothing. If 14 teams get into it, you have a secondary, a postseason, a playoff season, where you have 14 teams involved. So while it may be nice to have the extra teams in there, you have to start asking yourself, do these teams deserve to be in the playoffs? And then say they get hot and win. Is that something that the baseball fan wants to see? Interesting to find that out. Maybe it will be good, maybe not. I'm not a big fan of having that many teams in the playoffs. Because like I said, what makes the regular season? Why do you want to go spend a lot of money on tickets during the regular season? Because you have essentially 2 different seasons, that regular season and then the postseason. Where now at least, you've accomplished something if you've gotten into the baseball playoff situation. It's not like you've been laying back, knowing that 14 teams will get in. There's a strategy probably involved in that as well if you go to that 14-team postseason. Universal DH, this article says the owners secretly want it, even as they utilize it as a bargaining chip. I'm a long time, 45-year, maybe even 50 if you want to add, being a fan around 6 years old. I don't like the DH myself. I'm a National League guy. Always have been. I like to see the pitcher come up to bat. It adds some extra to the game to me. Can the pitcher bat? Some of the pitchers that we've seen over the years can bat great. They can bunt. This day and age, a lot of the talk is everybody wants to go to DH, the National League. And I kind of think it works great the way it is. Let the American League do their thing. If DH is the way they like it, fine. But I would have to say a poll of National League fans would probably bring more of a no to that answer. So I don't know where you stand on that as the listeners out there, but send us an email on what your thoughts are on the DH situation, even the work stoppage in general. Send us an email to rich@baseballtalkradio.com, or my esteemed co-host and a guy that, a big part of the show. He's one of my best friends talking baseball over the years, Mr. Gary Mack, and you can reach him at gary@baseballtalkradio.com. A wealth of baseball knowledge with him. And this is going to be a special announcement for him as well in this next segment of the program. And an organization called podranker.com has popped up on the radar for me today. I was looking up some good baseball talk shows, some podcasts like the one you're listening to now, and it brought me to a website. If you're watching our YouTube version of this show, I just put it up on the screen. Podranker.com. They have a list of the top 24 baseball podcasts available. Not sure how old this list is, but I stumbled upon it this morning thinking of that topic, and kept scrolling down. I see Effectively Wild here, Fangraphs Baseball Talk Show, and Fangraphs Audio, which is a separate ESPN rather, Baseball Tonight. It's a good podcast. And a couple of other national type of podcasts that showed up. Fantasy Baseball Today from CBS Sports Podcast. MLB.com's Fantasy 411. And as I was scrolling down reading this, here's Atlanta Baseball Talk. I was pleasantly surprised to read that they had our show as in the top 24 there. Of course, Baseball Talk Radio Show podcast. So great to be listed amongst these top 24 shows in baseball. And I'd like to invite you to go to a site that I produce and have made up over the years and code it. It's called baseballtalkradio.com, adding all the latest and greatest baseball talk shows for your listening enjoyment. And probably this summer I'll have the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week feed available for you to listen to around the world. And hope to have a lot of podcasts. Hopefully we'll have a baseball season to talk about as well. And I just wanted to mention a friend of the show for Gary, who's very close to these guys, and myself. Gary introduced me to him. Baseball and BBQ made the cut for the top 24 baseball talk show podcasts out there. And congratulations, guys. Great show. You guys are putting a lot of work into it. And you joined Gary on his Mets Musings podcast quite a lot. And it's great to see you listed as well here in the top 24 podcasts by podranker.com. All right, so it's awesome that we are involved in the top 24 baseball podcasts around the country here in the U.S. And let me take a minute or so to invite you over to two sites where you can now become a sponsor of the show. A little click on the screen, put your information in, and we'd love to have you as a sponsor. Go to patreon.com/baseball talk. You can support the show there. And you can go over to our main site where we house the shows for Baseball Talk Radio Show, and that's at anchor.fm/Baseball Talk Radio Show, all one word. And from there, you'll have a little link that says support, and you'll be able to support the show. And we appreciate it because, we need your support going on further for this show. And it allows us to bring you some special type things. We can invest in equipment, and Gary's always pushing the envelope on what we can do with the show, and myself as well. So we appreciate your sponsorship, and make 22 the year where you join us. I'd gladly give you a mention here on the show if you support our work that we do here. We're not sponsored by any big companies. We do this all on our own. We invest in equipment, things like that, and we love to further the cause, so to speak, here on the Baseball Talk Radio Show. Well, as I said, opening day is March 31st, scheduled anyway for March 31st, 2022, and that's not too far away in the grand scheme of things. We're roughly a month away from the time where spring training is supposed to start up. Around Valentine's Day is usually when that starts happening in Florida and Arizona. So we're at a tremendous risk right now if they don't get something scheduled to talk about between these two sides. And it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good at all. I wanted to get back to that article that I was talking about here by Ken Davidoff, and go down to the bottom of the screen, because this is what I like to examine and read about. What are the baseball fans themselves talking about in reference to this lockout? And it's great to read what their feelings are about this. So here's what the first one response here. 42 comments so far on the story here. Speaking as one of the majority MLB fans who are employees rather than an employer, just shut up, players! ! The benefits are first class. The pay is guaranteed. They're waited on hand and foot and never take a penny out of their pockets for job-related expenses. That's Gianni D.S. Be humble. Keep your heads down and thank the Almighty. Your skill set is an industry that pays absurd money and benefits. There are Hall of Fame teachers that work a second job to buy classroom supplies. And now, with the world on life support, remember your colleagues in the office to take care of you and have to work 10 years, 12 months a year for $600,000, not guaranteed. So, got 17 thumbs up on that post that went out to the players. Almost don't forget where you came from type of a situation there. And here's another one. Let's read this one. Imagine being a big box store, and this comes from Robert Moore. Imagine being a big box store worker who is told that they are essential and would be terminated if they called off from work. Then imagine losing your job because the teachers decided to do remote learning and you had to stay home with your kids. Okay, so that got 11 thumbs up. And here's Ian Simonson says, no, please don't side with the multi-billionaires who are trying to screw their employees out of greed. That is a terrible idea. That's one against the owners. Here's another one. The person's name is Are You Kidding? And he says, or she says, if you're going to have a luxury tax, then you should have a minimum tax that can't be carrying these freeloading small market teams, and no to 7-inning doubleheaders that totally rip off. Why should a fan have to pay full price for a shortened game, especially those split doubleheaders? And somebody agreed with him there, said, I agree with this. That is true. Why pay for a 7-inning game? And the thread goes on from there. 7-inning games are a joke, Anthony Scarpella said, especially when teams are doing split admission. Someone else responded, a bigger joke is starting an inning with a runner on second. So, some of the changes to baseball have not been very accepted by the longtime baseball fan. It's not something that goes over easily with them at all, and that's what happens with baseball fans. They know what they like, and they know that they don't like certain things that have been done in the last 2 to 3 years in the world of baseball. All right, well, I'm going to wrap this podcast up real soon. Last topic that I'd like to discuss is the Hall of Fame vote, and that is coming out January 20th. It will be announced, the winners, or maybe no winners this year for baseball, and the Hall of Fame, that is. And I just thought we would go spend a minute or two and talk about who's on the ballot. Of course, when Gary comes back onto the show, we will talk a lot more about this because we'll have a closer proximity to when the vote is going to be released. But here's the top. Let's go over the top 12 players in baseball here as ranked by last year's vote. And, of course, you need 75% of the ballots to gain induction into the Hall of Fame. Last year, Curt Schilling had 71.1% of the vote. So he may be a shoo-in for this year, I'm kind of thinking. And the next two guys are in what they would group as the steroid gang. They got 61% of the vote last year, which is kind of a high amount. I don't know over the years how many they've had, but Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens both at around 61.8% for Bonds, 61.6% for Clemens. Those are pretty high numbers. Maybe the baseball writers are starting to push that under the rug, forget about the steroid like Gary was talking about on a previous show. He's ready to move on. Just put them in and, deal with it, so to speak, I think is basically what he said on one show. Next is Scott Rowland at fourth there. He was 52.9% votes. I remember seeing Scott Rowland as a Philly for many years. It didn't really strike me as a Hall of Fame player, though, for whatever reason. I guess, I didn't follow him too much after he left Philadelphia. Did spend 17 years. Wow, 17 years in baseball. It's a long time. Didn't realize he was in for that long. He must have came up at a younger age as the next guy down on the list here, Omar Vizquel, 49.1% last year on the voting. 24 years a baseball player, and I do remember Omar Vizquel being a very long-term player, almost a quarter century on the field. So I think that really helps you a lot when you're a baseball player and you can put that many years in, because you can add up a ton of stats. He played 2,968 games, almost 3,000 games. He virtually tied Barry Bonds in the amount of games, who spent 22 years in baseball. He ended up with 2,986 games played. So Omar Vizquel at 2,968. Next on the list, Billy Wagner at sixth. Finished with 46.4. Great relief pitcher, closer. Remember seeing him many times with the Mets and the Phillies later on in his career. See how many years he played. 16 years in baseball. It's a long time. And I'm just going to digress a second and focus on his stats. 2004 and 2005 was when he was with the Phillies. He opened Citizens Bank Park, which opened in 2004. It was a great thing to have Billy Wagner as your closer. 21 saves in that season for the Phils. And then the next year, he had an amazing 70 games, appearances, 38 saves for the Phils in that year. And then somehow he left for free agency, and the Mets obtained him. And he really excelled for the Mets as well. 40 saves in 2006. So a 16-year career for Billy Wagner. Started off with Houston, flamethrower. Let's go down to the bottom of the page here on baseballreference.com. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, you see me wearing the Baseball Reference shirt today. I like to support that organization. They started out and are still based in Philadelphia, sort of an independent company. So go on over to their website and support them. Buy a T-shirt. You can do other things to support them. Pay for the site with no ads. And I used to even pay for banner ads on this site back in the day, which weren't that expensive. But it was fun to sponsor, say, a World Series team with the Phillies. I think back in 1911 or something like that rings a bell, that I might have sponsored that page for like $15 for a year. Then you could put your own ad. They don't do that anymore, unfortunately. I'd still be doing that to this day if they did it, but I guess they're making a lot more money on their own ads, of course. More than $15 on a page. But looking at the Hall of Fame statistics here, Hall of Fame Monitor, that's where you can see where a player stands as far as does he deserve to be a Hall of Famer. And yes, he does. 107. Likely Hall of Famer is pegged at 100. So yeah, he's got those numbers down pat because he was a relief pitcher. So it's kind of hard to get great numbers as a relief pitcher. You have to really be elite. And as you can see here, similar players by age. Trevor Hoffman, of course, he's a Hall of Famer. And not too many other relievers have made it to the Hall of Fame. You can see some good names here. Dan Plesac and Randy Myers. Not in the Hall of Fame. So we'll have to see if this gentleman can make it in this year, possibly. Billy Wagner. Right down the list, Todd Helton. Seemed like he was in baseball for a long time. 17-year career. Gary Sheffield, same thing. 22 years in baseball. Andrew Jones. Jeff Kent. And Manny Ramirez. Part of that, again, that steroid gang type crowd, so to speak. And number 12 right under him is Sammy Sosa. Same thing. But those two guys didn't garner the numbers that Bonds and Clemens have last year anyway. So it'll be interesting to see if either Bonds or Clemens gets into it this year for baseball. And the Hall of Fame just announced in roughly 11 days on the 20th of January. The writers will announce who their picks are, if anybody, for the Hall of Fame. There doesn't have to be an inductee into the Hall, but I think you could almost pencil Curt Schilling in based upon what he did last year, at least. So that about wraps it up for this show, the first show of 2022. Again, I hope your holiday season was great out there. And everybody's staying healthy with this Omicron-type variant of COVID-19 still with us. Seems like it's been with us for years now, and it has been. It's been a tragedy across the world, in this country. Currently, hockey and basketball taking precautions, more so hockey in Canada, no fans in the stands again. Hopefully we can get this illness away from us and we can get back to normalcy again, I guess is a nice term to put it. You know, where you can go to a baseball game and not have to worry about, am I going to come home with a horrible illness because of it. So hope everybody stays healthy out there. Keep washing your hands. If you wear a mask, that's fine too. Whatever you have to do to stay healthy out there. So we'll talk to you again on the next show, the Baseball Talk Radio Show. It's nice to be able to talk to you today and join you again. And Gary will be back with me on the next show. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.